Denis Johnson's historical fiction, Jack London's memoir, and Paul Theroux's travel log. I read them all because it's March. March on the rails. Hello, my fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky. I wanted to catch you up on what I have read for March on the Rails. More information on the event is in the description below. First book I want to talk about is Denis Johnson's Train Dreams. This was originally published in the Paris Review in 2002 and then restructured into novella form and published in 2011. It is historical fiction set primarily in the 1920s and 30s in the American West, specifically in the Panhandle region of Idaho. I don't often read a book that just knocks me on my ass, but this one did. The plot itself is fairly simple. The main character, Robert Grenier, is a young child. He's sent to live with relatives in the Idaho Panhandle, and he's not sure why. He's not sure exactly where he came from. As he grows up, he finds a lot of different jobs as a lumberjack, as a railroad laborer, as a freight hauler, and a lot of other odd jobs. He has a marriage that ends tragically, and he sees spirits. Most of these visions led by a man named Kootenai Bob. He lives alone, and he sees more spirits, and the end comes. The way Johnson tells this story is so gripping. The tough parts are a real slap in the face. Denis Johnson doesn't portray much the way of emotion or internal motive. We, as readers, we witness Grenier's action. We witness his responses, and it is left to us, as readers, to make our own meaning about his life. The woo-woo supernatural elements, dreams, it's left to us as readers to decide if these are imaginary or true. It's left to us to decide whether Grenier's actions are good or bad, helpful or harmful. It's all left to us. And I found this book dizzying in the most delicious ways. This story is set in northern Idaho, a part of the American West that I know fairly well. So a lot of these places were familiar to me. In Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Wallace, Bonners Ferry. In eastern Washington, Spokane, in Montana, northwestern Montana, places like Libby and Knoxon and Troy. And knowing those places did add to my own personal enjoyment of this novella. Like I said, it doesn't feel like much at first, but because of the way Denis Johnson tells his story, it has stuck with me. And I think it will stick with me for quite some time. This is the first Denis Johnson I've read, but I think if you enjoy historical fiction, especially if you enjoy historical fiction about the American West, kind of as technology is starting to come into these rural areas as towns are developing. If that sounds interesting to you, I think you would enjoy this book. And if you like books that have a clear plot but an ambiguous meaning that leave things up to you as a reader to decide, I think this is one you would definitely enjoy. Denis Johnson, Train Dreams, published in book form in 2011. The next book I want to talk about is written by Jack London. It's called The Road, and it's a memoir that was published in 1907. This is about his time in and around the 1890s. London was in his late teens and his early 20s, and he tramped across the U.S. and Canada mostly on freight trains. It also covers his time in prison near Niagara Falls. It covers his time with Kelly's Army, which was a western branch of Coxey's Army. And to me, some of the most fascinating pieces here are the technical descriptions of catching freight trains. There's a lot of skill involved in hopping a train and not getting caught, because the whole point is to travel without spending money, not in the passenger cars, but in the box cars or wherever it makes sense to travel where you don't have a ticket. And of course, there are railroad employees who are paid to not allow that to happen. So learning about these skills, I learned terms that I hadn't heard before. Ditching and decking and catching out. And he explains in detail what he does to get on a train and how to avoid the brakemen and the firemen and the other railroad train personnel. He also talks a lot about the various ways that the tramps found food and shelter, from panhandling and begging, to gambling, scavenging, rolling. He's not proud of everything that he did. It was also survival. I found these stories to be engaging and informative and challenging. I think any readers who enjoy Jack London's narrative style will definitely enjoy this book. And if you just enjoy adventurous memoirs, especially when they tie into the social and economic conditions of the time, in this case, the late 19th century in America, you'll find this fascinating. I have read a lot of Jack London, a number of his novels, a whole lot of his short stories, but this was the first time I delved into his nonfiction, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think my favorite Jack London novel is The Iron Heel, and I kind of think Burning Daylight takes second place, and that's over Call of the Wild and White Fang and some of his more famous works. But I would rank this, The Road, right up there with Burning Daylight. And there are some similarities. There is a lot of adventure, particularly in the first half of Burning Daylight. And there is a lot of commentary on the social and economic realities that were happening when London was writing these books. So that's Jack London's memoir, set in the 1890s in America, Canada, as he rides trains and hobos around. It's called The Road. It was published in 1907. And the third book I finished was by Paul Theroux, called The Great Railway Bazaar. This is our group read for March on the Rails, so I won't talk a lot about this until we finish this book at the end of March. I rushed through it because I was enthralled. It is a travelogue about Theroux's time riding trains primarily through Asia. The thing that hit me the most as I read it and as I finished it was the similarity to one of my very favorite travel writers, Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson was writing 15 years later or so. He started about 15 years later than Paul Theroux did. But you look at the style of The Great Railway Bazaar, and you look at the style of Bryson's A Walk in the Woods, and you see how Bryson was influenced by Theroux. And I'll say a lot more about this book when we get to the end of the March on the Rails event and everyone who is in the group has had a chance to read and reflect and comment. Paul Theroux, The Great Railway Bazaar, about a 4-month-long train trip he took in 1973. It was published in 1975. So that's what I've read for March on the Rails. I'm currently working on another memoir and another novel. Thanks to all of you viewers who have tuned in. Thanks to everyone who has put together the March on the Rails event. I hope you're having a wonderful reading month, whether you're reading about trains and railways or other things altogether. Till next time, my name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky.
Yippee-yi-yi, yippee-yi-oh, the Ghost Riders in the Sky.
Look at that. I did a whole video. I didn't even say fuck once.